And we are live, ladies and gentlemen. It is Tuesday night, 8 o'clock, and except for the little hiatus that we took last week to kind of reach ourselves, we are back. You are with the Fantasy Football Buzz podcast. You've got Cyclop, you've got 2020, you've got the Commish. Guys, how you doing tonight?
And I got to tell you, I'm doing great. You know, anytime we miss a week or anytime I miss a show, generally, that's all I think about, right? We're just a few weeks from training camp. But I got to tell you, the last week is the one time of the year where my phone gets turned off for an entire week. I don't think about my phone. I don't think about emails. I don't think about texts. I did think about football and fantasy, but not enough to check my phone. So I am happily back, ready to go. And sorry we missed last week.
I'm great. No, I'm good. I didn't have to talk to Cyclop for a week, so I'm fantastic. So that was that was awesome. That put me in a good space right there. No, we missed a week, but you know something? Just because we were off doesn't mean we weren't working. I think we got a fun show planned, and I'm looking forward to getting at some running back fun. So what about you, Commish? How you doing?
Good. All good. Up in North Carolina, same state as Cyclop, just different part of the state. And enjoying time. Only up here for a little longer, and then we're heading home. But in the meantime, it is time for Fantasy Football Buzz Podcast Running Back Night. An exciting night. 2 weeks ago, we had quarterback night. We talked about which quarterbacks are the ones to draft, which quarterbacks are the ones to stay away from, which quarterbacks are the ones that we love and that we recommend that you take. And tonight, we're going to do the same thing, but with running backs. Of course, just like any other night that we're up here, you can call us. You can be part of the show in two different ways. One way is to call us, 772-800-BUZZ, 2899. That will get you on the air. We'll speak to you live. The other way is to make a comment in one of our sections on our Facebook page, or you can do it in our YouTube page, and we will get to your comments, read them on the air. Not just comments, they can be
pizza delivery during the show. Love it.
That's very nice. Where's ours?
Chase. Just saying.
Hold on a second. Hold on. Hey, Chase.
All right. So, like I said, give us a call. So now it looks like that Kenny was trying to give us a call and it wasn't going through. Kenny, give us a call back. And this is very professional. But that's good.
Yes, food will be eaten on your time.
It's just like a draft. It's just like a draft. You're eating. You're having a good time. So Kenny was trying to call. Can I ask a question before we get too far into getting with running backs? There's Kenny trying to call, but I'm going to ask this question: has everybody adjusted for the 17-week season as far as your fantasy leagues? Right? Because you're going to have an extra week. Do you stop at the same time? Do you continue on for a week? Do the playoffs change? Maybe you add playoff teams because you have the extra week. There's a lot to discuss in a league. In your leagues, part of the new schedule this year.
Some validity to that. When to stop regular season, when to start postseason.
Right. Oh, and we got Kenny on the line. Kenny, can you hear us?
Okay, we can't hear you.
I don't hear Ken. I know he's on the line. He's not. I'm not muted here, so I'm not sure what's going on. We have a different setup tonight, so it's very possible that the calls won't go through. But in the meantime, Kenny, can you hear me now? Nope, I guess not. Kenny, why don't you do
type?
So let's do this, guys. Instead of calling tonight, make your comments, and we will go ahead and read them on the air. And what we've been doing each week. Oh, Kenny's trying again.
There he is.
We'll try one more time here. Kenny, can you hear me? Ken.
No, we're not hearing him. That's okay.
That's all right. Just comment in.
We're having the question of the night that Ken gives us every week for us to discuss before we get into, as Keith says, the meat and potatoes of our show. And actually, Ken, just go ahead and put in the comment section what your question of the night is, and we will get right to it, and we will address it before we hit the running back section. And Brad, as far as adjusting our our fantasy football leagues, you're absolutely right, because most leagues have playoffs up until week 15, and then they have the Super Bowl on week 16.
Correct.
Because obviously you don't want to play a Super Bowl in week 17 when everybody's sitting their starters. Right. So now we add that extra week. So I don't know if that means that there's going to be more playoff spots. It just means more fantasy football.
Just an extra week of regular season, basically. It's probably what it's going to translate to.
Probably be weeks 15 and 16.
Yeah, agreed.
But then there's probably not. You're almost thinking, do you then start adjusting your drafting strategy, going after those more durable players, dealing with one more game? It's not that big of a deal. It's something to consider.
I think it's going to adjust, and this is a big part of it. I think it's going to make a difference in teams giving certain running backs, right? It's not going to adjust any quarterbacks. It's not like, we have to rest the quarterback for a week or anything. But running backs, I think, will make the biggest impact as far as not giving them enough, too many carries. Not overworking them. So each week they may take away 2 or 3 carries. They may work that in throughout the season. So you have to be a little careful. And running backs will be wide receivers, not really going to make a difference, obviously. Quarterbacks, no, but running backs is the big one.
Well, I'll tell you something you really have to consider. Teams that are like excellent, that might lock up their playoff position like 2-3 games before the regular season ends. A Tampa Bay that looks very good. I don't know if you want to put Green Bay into that, but Kansas City, you might now be looking at them sitting and or resting their studs, 2 games before they get into the playoffs, which could be your Super Bowl. So it really does add a lot of facets. It adds some things you got to start considering when you're drafting players that are on those exceptional teams that can have their playoff position locked 2-3 weeks out with those extra games.
Yeah, these are all things that we got to think about. But in the meantime, let's jump into what we're going to talk about tonight, which is our running backs. And Ken, if you can hear us, Ken, and you have a question of the night, go ahead and make the comment in the Facebook page or YouTube page comments, and we will go ahead and address that question live on the air. If anybody else has any questions or comments, they want to find out what's going on, want to know about, it doesn't just have to be running backs. You want to know, what you should do.
What kind of pizza I'm eating.
What kind of pizza? Exactly. We already talked about ice cream last season. Now we're, topping. So if you have any questions at all, go ahead and put your comments, YouTube Live, Facebook, and we will get right to them. Let's jump to running backs, guys. We always talk about strategies for fantasy football, and the one strategy that keeps coming back year after year after year is you got to get those running backs. And we know that there is the 0 RB, model where you wait to get your running backs, but for the most part, you've got to get those running backs early. What running backs are going to be available, right? So what we asked Cyclop to do during the week was put together a list of 15 top running backs. Now, before I throw this up, right, I want to make it very clear that this is Brad's opinion.
Yes, I agree with that.
Hey, right, I understand.
No. And so what I want to do is I'm going to throw this up, literally throw it up. I'm going to throw this onto the screen. Brad, I want you to go through it, and I want you to tell us your mindset. What went through your mind when creating this ranking? And I will, for your sake, say this is preliminary without seeing any kind of camp or preseason. This is where we're at as of right now, right? So, I might tear holes in it, but it probably doesn't mean anything until, season starts.
And I certainly understand that, and I appreciate it. And I kind of looked at it, and there are certainly players in here that I know should be, potentially are going to be lower in some, potentially higher in some. But as I was looking at it, you look at a lot of different factors, especially with running back this year and how they have been in the past, new quarterbacks, new systems, all these different things, injury history. So I kind of went with that. And, and even as I was doing it and I'm, doing research and all these different things, I'm like, wow, this guy maybe should be higher. Or, wow, this guy maybe should be lower. And, you start looking at those things. But this is what I came up with. So go ahead and throw it up there. And look at that. Oh, I love that picture.
Now, I will tell you that it says 100% hemp. I think you were high when you did this list, but that's a whole other story. And the reason I'm saying that is most people, and doesn't mean it's right, doesn't mean it's wrong, but most people would have Christian McCaffrey number one.
Right.
You go Dalvin Cook, which by the way is fine, and it very well could be number one by the end of the season. But go ahead, talk to us about your selections here.
I was gonna make a different list, then I got high.
Too bad hemp doesn't have any THC in it.
No, I didn't.
Right. I'm also trying to figure out who Kenny Mixon is, by the way. Is that Kenny? Is that a South Park?
I don't
number
think
15.
Did I do that?
Number 15. You definitely were high because we have Kenny Mixon on there. Who I might be interested in drafting, actually.
I don't know why it says Kenny Mixon, but did I write that? Kenny Mixon?
I don't know. Maybe you were thinking about South Park. I mean, who killed Kenny? I have no idea.
Anyway.
We'll get to that. But
so Dalvin Cook, look, in 2020, he played 14 games. I think the offense there is just perfectly set up for him. If he could stay healthy a whole season, which isn't easy for him to do, he had 17 TDs last year, 317 carries, which is a nice number, right? Derrick Henry had almost 380, right? How long is he going to last? But Dalvin Cook, when he's healthy, he showed that he is a beast. They bring back their starters. They still have Cousins. They have Jefferson, who, came onto the scene last year, and they have Thielen. I think the offense is set up so prime for him to have an amazing year. Now, also, I went through all of these, and you look at strength of schedules. They have the number nine strength of schedule at the moment. Now, of course, that's preseason. It's based off last year. I get all that. But I just feel with the other two actually McCaffrey, who I would have normally picked number one, who I did last year, and that worked out really well. I just looked at a few other things and moved Cook into that number one spot. I don't think it's a far fetch.
That's the question actually that I have for you is there a personal bias? And there's nothing wrong with that, because we talked about the fact that we may or may not pick people based on, some bias that happened last year or the year before. Is there any personal bias that maybe I wouldn't have or Keith wouldn't have in moving McCaffrey down to number 3?
Not at all.
ADP
not at all.
Across the board.
I'll give you two main reasons I moved him to 3 instead of 1, or let's say 2. Right, Henry and McCaffrey. You can't go wrong with either one of these guys. But I have two things. Strength of schedule is 28th for McCaffrey. Okay, and again, I understand it's last year. That's okay. The second one, the most important, 2 words: Sam Darnold.
Yeah, no, it's definitely a concern. There we go.
Yeah, but last year when it wasn't Sam Darnold, it was Teddy Bridgewater,
and I think he was a much better fit for what McCaffrey will do. Look, Sam Darnold could be a good quarterback. He was stuck in New York. Nobody knows. Maybe that'll work. Now, that said, McCaffrey, I think he was shut down the last several games. I really think he was just shut down. They're like, we're not going to play him. We'll save him for next year. I get that. The 3 weeks that he did play, he's essentially the number one running back in the league.
He was insane.
He's a beast. Yeah. He's incredible to watch. He's an incredible player. But with Sam Darnold there, I just don't know what's going to happen.
All right, and that's fair criticism. Not to mention that that offensive line. So, I understand. I think if you have the top 3, one of the top 3 picks in the draft this year, you're good. You're golden, right? I mean, you get 1, 2, or 3, you should be good. And before we go to the rest of your list, I have a kind of a bit of a trivia question about running backs from last year. And can you guys tell me, there's a running back who was number 3 in the league in carries, number 3 in the league, tied for number 3 in the league in touchdowns for running backs, yet was 11th in fantasy football points per week.
Was this last year?
I know who that is.
Yeah.
Oh, wait a minute. 11th in total fantasy football points?
Per week.
Per week. Okay. And number third. Okay. And third in the league in carries.
He was third in carries.
Third in touchdowns, but 11th in fantasy points per week. And the reason
Josh Jacobs
is correct. And the reason I'm bringing this up, because number one, I see he's not on your list, and that's understandable.
Right. It's interesting. Yeah.
But I bring that up because a lot of times we get enamored with touchdowns, or we get enamored with carries, or even if we get enamored with yards without touchdowns or without, whatever other extra points, receptions, right? Look at Alvin Kamara, who we'll get to in a second. He was actually number 13 in the league in carries last year.
Yeah, he did not have a lot of carries, and he didn't break 1,000 yards on the ground.
Yet he was number 3 in fantasy football points, number 4 in fantasy football points per week.
Right.
So I'm just, I'm bringing this up about Josh Jacobs. I'm bringing this up about carries versus touchdowns versus yards. So back to your list, yes, Dalvin Cook, Derrick Henry, Christian McCaffrey.
Interestingly enough,
there's something else that you really have to look at. It's not just the number of touchdowns and what you're talking about. It is so absolutely critical to look at average fantasy points per game, because what I remember Josh Jacobs had, you're going to have 1, maybe 2 blow up games. And those blow up games, so I think he had at least one game where he scored 3 touchdowns. That's 25% of all of his touchdowns. So you have these monster games, which is great for that week. It gave you the win that week, but you'd much rather have that kind of production consistently all throughout the year, because Josh Jacobs, he would disappear for games, and several of them actually. So it's such a big deal. When you're doing your drafting, you might even want to go in and actually look game by game, especially if they had a great matchup that week. That's going to really artificially inflate the numbers on someone because of those blow-up games. Yes, it's such a big deal.
I'm making this list, and that was the one name that I kept like, where do I put him? Where do I put him? And it was the one name. It's like, I can't put him in here. No, I can't put him in here. No, and it's like kept going down.
Is it the Drake factor?
No, it's just he had like that one. I think that one game was like week 1, or something last year. Josh Jacobs, because I think 2020 we took him in our other league, and after week 1, we're like, yes, that was a great pick, and then he sucked the rest of the year.
He did.
Fantasy wise.
And I will tell you this, and since he's not on the list, we can talk about him for a second and then stop. But I can tell you that things aren't going to necessarily get any better in Vegas for Josh Jacobs. So for as good / bad as you want to say he was last year, it's not going to get any better. And unless you tell me differently, I don't necessarily see a reason why all of a sudden he's going to make a leap and go back to, he had a better rookie year, right? I mean, they have the Raiders have the 20th offensive line. And, they're picking Alex Leatherwood for some strange reason at number 17 when he was really projected to fall. They've got Richie Incognito, which the three of us, the fact that he's 74 years old. But, look, their line didn't do much last year, and it's not going to get any better this year. So
no, and he gets game scripted very often out of games. He's not a prolific pass catcher, and I don't think it's because of his ability. It's just how they seem to offensively coordinate the games. He only had 33 receptions last year, and that I think was more a bump up from his rookie year. So it's just not a big part of his game, and that's a big part, as we know, as being a premier running backs. And I think the Kenyon Drake factor is really going to have an impact there as well. So I agree.
Let's talk about your next pick at number 4, Brad.
So hang on one second. I see that Kenny put his question in here. Do you want to?
No, we'll get to that after running backs. We'll go ahead.
Okay. So Kenny, we'll get to you. We'll get to that. So have no fear.
But let's go with your number 4, Jonathan Taylor, which I find interesting because ADP right now is around 10.
That's correct.
And you have him at 4. Is there a reason why you have him above Kamara and Barkley right now?
So look, I know that Marlon Mack is there. Kamara is fantastic, and all my notes on Kamara, and obviously we know he's great. The quarterback situation there worries me a little bit. They do obviously like to use Murray, but they do use the running back slot a lot on plays, and I get that. It's not like Kamara could be the number 2 pick in leagues. I have him at 5. Okay, Taylor, I just think showed in the second half of the year that he is going to be the guy. They bring in Carson Wentz. I understand that. I think Wentz is a better fit for that offense, and I think he is a good fit for what Taylor can do. And that's why I moved him up there.
All right. So I'm curious if anybody who's out there listening right now, go ahead and put a comment on Facebook page or on YouTube Live. I want to know what you think about Brad's order right now. What would you do differently? I can tell you right off the bat, I would definitely have Kamara above Taylor. Now, I'm not taking anything away from Taylor. I agree with you in the sense that I believe that Taylor is going to have a great year. They've got one of the best offensive lines in the NFL. I see Taylor definitely having a great year, but at the same time, they're not going to be able to rely on Drew Brees. It's going to be a different offense, but Kamara is such a playmaker, and it's hard to discount. The only question that I would ask myself at this point is Saquon Barkley versus Jonathan Taylor. We all know what Barkley can do. Is it because he's in a Giants offense that has no offensive line, no quarterback, and everyone's going to be keying on Barkley, which, by the way, they've done in the past, and it hasn't mattered.
It doesn't matter.
Yeah, and before we get into Quan, I got to chime in on this as well, because other than the fact that Josh Jacobs wasn't on the top 15, and when you think about it, it does make sense. The other thing that really stood out to me, glaring on here, was that exactly as Commish said, that you put Taylor over Kamara, and he is a beast. I mean, and my God, the last 4 or 5 games of the year, he blew it up, and I think Carson Wentz, his coming in actually is going to help Taylor's value. But I mean, Alvin Kamara, 21 total touchdowns last year, 83 grabs on 103 passing targets. This is like getting a wide receiver 1 wrapped up in an RB 1 that is, and granted, I had Kamara and Lat Murray last year, and it actually made me nuts because there were some games, a few of them, where Murray outperformed Kamara. It was making me a little bit nuts, but I think the quarterback situation in New Orleans is going to favor Kamara, actually. I think they're going to rely on him more, a lot more dump-off passes. I think that's a little bit of a stretch.
I don't know that that's possible. Let me ask you a question. Don't look at stats. How many 100-yard rushing games did Alvin Kamara have last year?
He might have had 0. It doesn't matter, though. It's irrelevant. I look at
100-yard running back.
No, I understand that. But so you're saying 0 2020? What about you, Commish?
Maybe 0, yeah.
I think probably 1 or 2.
Okay.
Maybe.
He had 100-yard running game last year. And also, of his 21 touchdowns, 6 were from one game. 6.
He still had, but he's still
in one game.
But that
was the same game. That was the same game.
Leaves 10 other rushing touchdowns. He had 16 rushing touchdowns. It's very good.
I completely understand. He's amazing. He's an amazing player. Maybe the top 2 or 3 talented running backs in the league. It might be it's McCaffrey, Cook, and Kamara. I just don't know what's going to happen with the quarterback.
All right. So here, I'm smelling a bet, and every week we have to have one. End of year.
That's not all you're smelling.
Well, your pizza, as Chase brought it in, by the way, you're smelling very good. Remember, we're a meat and potato show. So I'm going to take Kamara, and you're going to take Jonathan Taylor, and we're going to do total fantasy points end of the year. Now, hold on. There has to be one contingency, because this isn't based on injury. Go. No. This isn't based on if there's an injury and they don't play the full contingency of all the games, it'll be points per game, average points per game by the end of the year. Because it's not fair if someone gets injured. We're not talking about that. We're talking about talent and team and setup. So if one gets injured, we'll do average points per game.
All right.
So I'm not ready. Write it down, Brad. I'm not ready to make this bet yet, to be honest with you. I'm going to wait on this one. I really see where Brad is coming from with regard to Taylor. I really do. I also see where he's coming from with regard to Kamara. So I'm not ready to make a decision on that. But
so just so you know, and I'll give you these numbers, and I only have Taylor and Kamara one player apart. It's not like it's like Taylor, 4 and Kamara 9. They're right there. Taylor's strength of schedule 4th right now. Kamara 25th. Again, I understand
he had a tough strength of schedule last year too. By the way,
I understand that. And,
okay, well, listen, if I'm going to put my money on a bet on these running backs, it's going to be the fact that you have Cam Akers at number 6
over Barkley and Chubb.
I will tell you that I have him as running back 16. He's not even in my top 15. Again, not saying that Cam Akers isn't going to have a good year because their line is very good. He's now going to be the focal point of that offense. Who knows? Especially with Stafford there, it's going to make things much better for everybody. So I like Cam Akers. I just don't have him above all these guys that you have there. What's your thinking on that?
Sometimes you just get a feeling about a player.
Right.
And I obviously had it last year. It was obviously more of a rash of a feeling than a good feeling. But he did end up, pretty good.
Really? We're going to go
there? Look.
You even have him above the rookie that I recommended to everybody, which was Antonio Gibson, who ended up, I believe, having a better year than Cam Akers. And I know they had Malcolm Brown there. They had Jared Goff. It was a probably a little bit.
I have Gibson higher than a lot of people have Gibson.
Yeah.
But
Gibson had a great year.
I just think with the addition with bringing Matt Stafford in, I think he likes to dump it off. I just think the offense is going to run a little bit smoother. It would be hopefully more consistent. And I just think he's the guy. Look, they got rid. They don't have. He doesn't have to compete with Henderson anymore. Excuse me,
Malcolm Brown.
Malcolm Brown, it's Henderson, and he took a back seat. It's going to be the Akers show there,
right? There's no doubt, right? But the question is not necessarily will Cam Akers have a good year or bad year. We know he's going to have a good year, right? The question is he going to have a better year than Nick Chubb, than Saquon Barkley,
or Aaron Jones? Yeah.
Than Ezekiel Elliott. Is he going to have
Montgomery, who had a great year? Yeah.
And look, I have Montgomery. Where do I have Montgomery at? Like 12. Yeah. I mean, Montgomery didn't have a great year. Montgomery had a great few weeks to end the season. But if you look at the teams that Montgomery played near the end of the season, it shows a little bit why it got that much better. But maybe did they figure it out there? It's like, oh, this guy's pretty good. Let's use him. How does that translate to this year?
Well, let me tell you, Montgomery was number 4 in the league in carries running back. Yeah. He was number 4 in the league in fantasy football points for running backs.
By the end of the year.
And he had 54 grabs. I mean, Montgomery, that wasn't about the last few games he played. He didn't tear it up on the ground.
Carries, he was getting 20 carries for 33 yards for the first 8-9 weeks.
Exactly. It was half the season. And that's why he, even though he was number 4 in carries and he was number 4 in fantasy points, he was number 8 in fantasy points per week because he had, the beginning weeks where he wasn't doing well. And then he loaded it up at the end. That's what you want to see, right? You don't want to see the guy who has a lot of points the first half of the year and then think you're going to draft him after he sucks the second half. So I like the Montgomery pick at 12. What I don't like in this sense is how far down Ezekiel Elliott, and I really hope that a lot of people are sleeping on him.
Yeah.
The Cowboys' offensive line was so terrible last year. Well, people are healthy again. Things are back to that offensive line that we were used to seeing in Dallas. I don't see, yes, I would get Tony Pollard as a handcuff, but I have no problem, even though I had him last year and I hated having him last year and I traded him away, I would pick him again this year.
So with Elliott, did he lose a step? we don't know, right? Dak got hurt. The whole offense was out of whack. They didn't know what to do. Here's one number that really stood out to me. And look, if Elliott's there and I'm picking and he's there at, and say I have the number 8 pick, do I take Elliott? Yeah, I'm going to think about that. I'm not saying he can't move up, but I just don't know that I want to put him there. Here's a number that really stood out to me. Over his career, right, and I think he's going into his 7th year, 1,400 plus career attempts. Okay?
You're saying he's worn out.
He could be worn out, right? It showed a little bit last year. They brought Pollard in. He looked a lot more fresh. Pollard was making cuts and moves that Elliott normally would have made. And Pollard was doing that last year instead of him when he came in. So that's why I moved him down.
Okay, so another glaring thing that hit me was Najee Harris, the rookie out of Alabama, was drafted by Pittsburgh pretty high, and you have him as the number 10 running back. And the thing that bothers me the most about the fact that you have him at number 10 is when you look at that offensive line for Pittsburgh, we're all thinking you're just plugging and playing Le'Veon Bell. But the point is,
terrible.
That offensive line, only the Dolphins, the Giants, and the Panthers have a worse offensive line than Pittsburgh. And even though the Panthers, CMC, you don't need an offensive line for CMC. But I will tell you that Pittsburgh is going to need an offensive line for someone like Najee Harris.
Yeah, I think they got to go against Cleveland twice. They got to go against Baltimore twice. They have a tough schedule. That I want for that reason, and only for that reason only. It is not an indictment on his talent. I will have Najee Harris nowhere. And I know he's a talent, and I think you put him in Indy and he'd run for 1,800 yards. But you said it dead on, Commish. That's going to be a problem for him, finding holes to run through.
Well, the only person I would put him above on this list, the only person, is J.K. Dobbins. But other than that, I don't even necessarily see it. And in fact, by the way, I'm a little upset that our boy Myles Gaskin isn't on your list of the top 15, because I would take Gaskin before Harris. I would take Gaskin before Dobbins. Gaskin was number 12 in the league in fantasy points per week. Let's not forget about it. So just something else to throw out there to keep in mind. And maybe I'm being a bit of a homer for the Dolphins talking about Myles Gaskin, but
there was only like 6 or 7 running backs that were averaging more total yards from scrimmage per game when he was healthy and in. He's a very unknown, very unheralded running back. It's true.
Look, I get it. He's a rookie. The offensive line is not great. Their strength of schedule is actually number 5 right now, so it's a very good strength of schedule. You're saying against Cleveland. Cleveland doesn't really have a great run defense. The reason I like Harris, he's a rookie. He's going to be the workhorse. His only competition there is Benny Snell.
Right.
So he's going to be the workhorse. I think he'll get a lot of goal line carries, or inside the 5, inside the 10-yard line. So of course touchdowns can make up a lot. If you're going to have 60-yard games, if you get the touchdowns, that's okay.
Yeah, and look, I'm not as much I'm not as immune to him as Keith is. I just don't have him at 10, but I would have him as my RB2. Yeah. I don't have a problem with that, or as an RB3. I don't have a problem with that. I'm not going to have him as an RB1. And if it's the 10th back on the board, that's your RB1. I'm not picking Najee Harris as my RB1.
No, I think in most ADPs he's going in the 2nd round.
I guess that the only other question I want to pick here, pick your brain, Brad, with regard to this list is Nick Chubb. And there's no denying Nick Chubb and how he did and how what a great player he is. But the question is Kareem Hunt.
I agree.
What does that do to Chubb? Hunt was 11th in the league in carries, and Chubb was 14th in the league in carries.
That's good. Chubb missed 12 games. Look, Hunt is always going to make the Chubb go down.
You've been dying to say that all night. You've had that in your pocket all night, haven't you?
Perfect pitch down the middle on that one.
Hunt gets hurt, the Chubb goes up. Look,
Yeah, but okay. So, but assuming that both Chubb and Hunt are healthy and ready to go, right?
yeah.
You think Chubb at that point is a good pick, regardless. I mean, and I agree. By the way, I think I have Chubb at 8 also. So I'm not saying that you have him in the wrong spot. I'm just picking both your brains right now about the Hunt impact and whether
Even if you looked at the games when they were both in together, I think which it was after week 8, right? Chubb was still lighting it up. I mean, he is such a talent, and they have a great run game there. So the Hunt factor obviously impedes it somewhat, but Chubb is so good, and they love feeding him the ball. And it's a pretty healthy split. I like him at 8. He is that good, even with Hunt in.
Chubb had double-digit attempts in every game he played except one, and that was week 4. I believe that's when he got hurt. Then he sat out for 4 games. His lowest was 11, and his highest was 20 after that. Had a touchdown every week except week 11. 1, 4, and 11. He had a touchdown every other week. So his consistency is very nice. You know, he didn't necessarily have these blow-up games where he was scoring 35 points. But, you know, fantasy-wise, he's averaging, 12, 16, 20.
He was 6th in the league in points per week.
Right.
So
and on a good scoring team with a very good defense, Cleveland has a much improved defense that they're going to be able to, in some of these games, really run things out at the end as well and just feed them, which I love.
So I have one more question. We kind of touched on it a few weeks ago when we were talking, or a little longer than that, maybe 3 weeks ago when we were talking about rookies.
Yeah.
But James Robinson, right? Oof. He ended up being 7th in the league in points per week. What do you do with someone like James Robinson? He was number 6 in the league in carries, 7 in the league in fantasy points. You know, and then they go ahead and they draft NTN, right? So
rookie quarterback draft, you know, it's
your grad is with regard to that. But Keith, does Robinson make your top 15?
Because of the NTN factor, he unfortunately does not. I care much less about the Trevor Lawrence factor than I do the fact that they spent such a high draft pick on this guy. And it puzzled a lot of people why they would do that when they had such a good running back. But because of that, it's an unknown. You're looking at the very best, it's going to be a 50-50 split on an offense that's probably going to struggle. He was the focal point of that offense, right? He had 240 carries. It's a lot of carries. That's one of the top in the league. And I for that reason, he's falling out of the top 15. The NTN factor definitely hinders.
With all the stuff we've talked about, and Brad, thank you for putting this list together, but all the stuff we talked about.
Thank you for tearing it apart.
Well, I'm not. I have one more glaring issue here that I will bring up. And Keith, I want to hear if you have any glaring issues that we haven't brought up. But my one glaring issue that we haven't spoken about is the omission of Austin Eckler on this.
That's a good point.
And I personally would have Eckler before Harris, before Gibson, before J.K. Dobbins, before Joe Mixon. You know, this is Eckler's offense.
So here's my response to that. So I'm going to just hold this up. Okay, this is my handwritten list I did before I, wrote. I was just kind of making it making crosses out. Yeah, they can't see that, but. Like really, I was looking at this like 11 through 15 could all be interchangeable, right? Is kind of the way I was thinking about it. And I actually have on here 15 Mixon, Eckler, Dobbins. I have all those guys in that 11 to 15 range. So he's right in there. Now Eckler could easily be somebody, the number 7, right? He was kind of a hot pick last year after Melvin Gordon was gone, and he, he's getting all those catches. This guy could be the steal of the draft if he kind of slips into the late second round or mid-second round.
And I agree. I have Eckler as ADP of 21 as the 15th running back off the board. I have him above J.K. Dobbins. The problem with him is he is phenomenal out of the backfield. He's also a phenomenal running back, but what he's never been able to show yet, I still have him as 15. He hasn't been able to show that this is a guy that can handle 200 rushing attempts in a season. The question is, can his body, can his frame do that? Where he excelled was when it was him and Melvin, when he was number 2 of a 1-2 punch. I had him in 2 leagues last year, and it hurt. And it's a big question mark. If this guy stays healthy and gives you 14, 15 games, I agree with you, Cyclop. He can be something special. That's a big question mark, unfortunately. Still, you take the risk because he's that much of a talent.
Right. There's so many running backs that you could, in this, what you would call after 10, maybe even after 15, Josh Jacobs, Gaskin, Mike Davis in Atlanta. I mean, what does he do, right? Or Miles Sanders, Swift. Now, I was big on Swift last year. That team looks like it's going to be a mess this year, but who knows? Raheem Mostert. They lose not Breida. Breida was in Miami. They lost a couple running backs there, right?
But they also drafted that running back. They moved up to get that running back out of North Carolina, Williams. So that's going to hurt Mostert.
Yeah, Javonte. Oh, no, not Javonte Williams. But right.
Yeah, Javonte Williams. You're right.
No, he's in Denver.
Denver. I'm sorry.
Yeah. So let me ask you this question. I'm gonna pull this up one more time. Which of these guys, where's that first round, second round cutoff? Right. We know Cook, Henry, McCaffrey, Taylor, Kamara, probably Barkley they're gonna go in the first round, right? Where does the second round start? People are gonna pick Mahomes. People are gonna pick wide receivers, Tyreek Hill, et cetera, in the first round. So there's going to be a few running backs that drop. But which running backs are actually going to be available in the second round on this?
I think it's going to be the Chubbs and the Aaron Jones and the Gibsons and the Najee Harris, Montgomery. Eckler should be there. Joe Mixon, who another one I want no part of. These are the people that will be there in the second round. Absolutely, yeah.
Okay, so Commish, last year, 2020 and I, we split a team. We have for 20 years now in another league. I think we drafted we drafted Josh
Mixon
Jacobs and Mixon, and we were so excited to get those two. Oh man, what a headache.
No part of either of those guys. Yeah, terrible.
All right, before we move on, do you see anything glaring on that, Keith, that you want to bring up before we get to Ken's question?
No, it was Eckler. That was the one thing. Eckler to me is definitely a top 15, and then where Kamara was fitting in ahead of Taylor, which again they were back to back. So other than that, I think that's fine. That's pretty spot on.
Okay, so Ken, we did, and again, we're sorry that the phone's not working, but Ken, who is the biggest fan of the Fantasy Football Buzz podcast, he calls in every week. And we asked him to go ahead and make a question of the night, and that we will bring it up. We will discuss it. If anybody who's watching wants to comment and give us their feelings on it, we welcome that as well. So the question is, who would you consider your 2021 breakout stars? And again, a breakout star, we're looking at somebody who wasn't necessarily great last year, but is going to do much better this year. Do either of you guys have any thoughts or anybody you want to throw out in it? By the way, it doesn't have to be running back, could be quarterback, could be, could be anybody. I'll bring up somebody because they don't get any love, and I'm going to go with kickers because I think Koo is actually a breakout star. And I think when people start looking at kickers and they're thinking that you got to grab Tucker, you got to, used to be Gostowski, right? And then they would grab Tucker. I think at this point, Koo could make a difference. If he's giving you 10 to 15 points a game, I think he can make a difference. Now, I know I'm in timeout now for talking about kickers.
I was just we're going to forget that you just brought up a kicker as your breakout star.
I blacked out after you said get out.
I think he's one of the breakout stars for the coming.
So what round are you going to draft him in as a kicker?
Probably third. No,
third round. Third round. And this is why I love being in a league with you, Commish. That's beautiful.
Go ahead. Who are some of your breakout stars here?
Go ahead. I'm picking between two. You go, Cyclop.
You know, it's. I don't know. I had actually done some research on this, and I don't have it in front of me.
Can I tell you? Can I go?
Yeah, go ahead, Keith. Go ahead.
Go ahead.
Oh my God, I'm forgetting his last name. The tight end in Washington, Logan Harris. Logan
Thomas.
Logan Thomas. With Fitzpatrick there, who loves to pepper the tight end. And they've got a lot of weapons there. They really do. Scary Terry with everything. I think he could be after Travis, after Kelsey and Kittle. He could easily be the third tight end in fantasy production. I think Fitzpatrick's going to hit him early and often. He showed incredible chops last year. He was putting up good numbers, but I think he has a chance to be, definitely a top 5, maybe even, top 3 or 4 tight end this year.
I agree. I think that is a great pick.
My issue with that is how many games of Fitzpatrick do you get? How many games of Fitzmagic do you get? And how many games of Fitzpatrick do you get?
I'm calling. If you didn't have Tua, you would have had all the games as.
And you know something, and that is exactly right. And in Miami, let me tell you something. He didn't have those 3-4 interception games. He actually played extremely steady during his tenure in Miami. And, we wanted to showcase Tua. We wanted to know what we had to see if we had to pick one this year and what have you. But I'm not saying he turned a corner or not, but last year, you got to give credit to what Fitzpatrick did. He played fantastic, and he's going to where he's going to have better weapons now than he did before. So watch out for what Washington's going to do on offense. I love Gibson because of that, too.
I'll tell you who my breakout star is going to be. Okay, and I talked about this guy a few weeks ago when I called in, and I just think he goes into a great situation, and it's going to be Jamar Chase. He goes into Cincinnati. I know. You guys can shake your heads.
No, boo.
Whatever.
T. Higgins will have more points than Chase this year.
That doesn't mean he can't be a breakout star.
I agree.
Yeah, T. Higgins will do better than Chase this year.
I'm with Keith on that one. What about guys? You mentioned him a little while ago, Brad. Mike Davis in Atlanta.
I was thinking that as well.
Yeah,
got no one to compete with.
Mike Davis went into a great situation to take over for McCaffrey, right? That offense was basically built around that position.
With a bad offensive line, mind you.
I know, but think about how many of Mike Davis's points were dump-offs. Catches.
And what you're right.
And that's what's going to happen in Atlanta. Yeah. It's going to happen in Atlanta.
But without Julio, they've got more people. But
you have the you have the Pitts there now, and you had I don't know.
I also think as far as other breakout stars that yes, I agree that Chase is going to be a breakout star, but Chase Edmonds. Not Jamar Chase. I think
right.
Chase Edmonds in it.
For the Cardinals, you don't have to worry about the Kenyon Drake sharing carries anymore.
What about James Conner?
I don't think he's going to.
Oh, was that a joke?
Yes.
No, will Conner eat in Chase Edmonds carries is the point, and that's very possible. But I think you're going to, because Edmonds is so dynamic, you're going to see a lot of that as well.
And one more, and this is a homer pick, but we were talking about it, but his numbers really were supporting it. I think Myles Gaskin has a shot to give you somewhere between 12 to, mark my words, somewhere between 12 to 1,500 yards from scrimmage. If this guy stays healthy, I think the offensive line, you got Kinley and Hunt with 2 more years, and they started really gelling nicely. I love Liam Eichenberg. That guy's a beast. Watch what Myles Gaskin could do, getting the ball in his hands, 15, 20 total touches a game. He could do something special.
So I just want to point out a couple things. As far as Kenny's asking some questions. He did a Who Am I? So we can get to that. I don't know if you saw that in there, Commish. But Chase Edmonds last year, so he did start a game. It happened to be against Miami. It looks like he started. He had 25 carries.
Yeah.
He had 25 carries for 70 yards, 2.8 average. How many touchdowns do you think Edmonds had all last year?
Not a lot. They brought in Drake on the goal line.
Right.
I don't think he had it.
He had
one.
one touchdown last year.
They brought in Drake
rushing, 3 receiving. Yeah, he did have. He made his mark in his targets last year. So if he could pick up the rushing end of it, that's great. But is he that running back?
Well, the problem is Kyler Murray vultures so many of the goal line carries. That's
carries
how the
in general.
Offense carries in general. Yeah, I picked up Chase Edmonds last year when Drake went down, and I thought it was going to be a nice pickup. He really didn't do much. It was only for a few games, but you know what? Now it's his show. Now he's going to get to catch the ball 7, 8, 9, 10 times a game, and he is pretty dangerous in the open field. So he has a chance. We'll see. We'll see with him as the feature back. It's going to be interesting.
Kenny wants to know what's with Tyrod Taylor, whether or not Tyrod Taylor is going to be a breakout star in Houston.
No.
Well, we don't even know. We don't know what's going on in Houston, right? You're in Houston, you're in Texas, Kenny, so you might have more info. But from everything I see, Watson's still the quarterback, guys. And until I hear different, and even if he is not the quarterback, they did draft Davis Mills in the 3rd round. If I'm Houston and I'm in this rebuilding stage, I'm not. We're back to the thing with Tyrod Taylor being the guy who's holding the spot for the rookie.
Right. That doesn't mean he can't have a good year,
right?
Or get some stuff done. But they lost the receivers.
Yeah.
Who's their top receiver there? Kiki Kuti.
Yeah. So I see Taylor maybe being in there for a game or 2 or 3 games if Watson isn't around, and then I see them bringing in Davis Mills to kind of see what they have in him to see what they need to do for next year.
Is that one of the best names in football right now?
Kiki Kuti? It's pretty darn good. Yeah.
For sure. We'll do a show where we'll talk about names. That'll be one of the things we talk about.
All right.
Can we get Key and Peele to come on and co-host with us?
Oh my God.
All right.
The Who Am I we'll get to next week. All right. I see your Who Am I question. We'll get to that next week. I'd rather get to Keith. Now, did you put anything together with some
I did. I did another fun segment for us this week. And this is not Who Am I. Today we're going to play 3 truths and a lie. You know how to play that, of course, right?
Okay. Yeah. Let me. Kenny did ask a question. Who am I? The leader in 400-yard passing games. Now, Kenny, I would like to clarify. Was that last year or is that forever? If you could put that in, we will try to guess.
If it was last year, I think I'm going to go with Dak Prescott.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Could be.
In his shortened time, I think it was every week. He might have been the leader in 5 minutes.
Yeah, overall, it might be somebody like
Dan Marino.
Nah, I was thinking like Roethlisberger.
Might be.
Oh, so he wants overall?
All time. All time, it says.
Most 400-yard passing games?
Yeah. I'm going to go with
Roethlisberger.
I'm going to go with Drew Brees.
With Drew Brees?
Drew Brees. Okay.
He didn't become a leader.
Achilles Smith.
I'm actually going to go with Tom Brady.
Oh, we already got the answer. It is Drew Brees.
Okay. Good job, Commish. Good job. All right. Well, let's see how good you do with this. All right. So this is 3 truths and a lie.
And by the way, anybody who's watching or listening right now, if you have an answer to this, go ahead and make the comment. We'll pause for a minute to see if anybody's going to comment, and then we'll answer. Go ahead.
Okay. All right. So I'm going to name a running back, and I'm going to give you 3 truths and a lie. Tell me which one of these is the lie. First running back we're doing is Jonathan Taylor.
All right.
I was 3rd in rushing yards last year. I had 4 fumbles. I had 11 rushing touchdowns. And I had the 2nd best rushing rookie season in Colts team history. Which one is the lie? Again, I was 3rd in rushing yards. I had 4 fumbles. I had 11 rushing touchdowns, and I had the 2nd best rookie rushing season in Indianapolis Colts team history.
Well,
which one is the lie?
Brad, let's break down these rookies, right? So Edgerrin James.
Okay. That was what I was thinking, right?
Clearly number 1. I don't remember if Marlon Mack broke out his rookie year or the year after.
I think it was his rookie year,
So-
but it was like it wasn't right from the beginning of the year. But neither was Jonathan Taylor.
But I also remember something a lot. I don't know if it's just 4 or maybe it's more than that.
I know. I want to say just because I did the research on him, I'm fairly certain he did have 11 touchdowns, and I do believe I actually looked at his fumbles, and I think it was 4. So I'm down to the other 2, and I'm more inclined to say what was the first one? It was
the first one was that he was third in rushing yards.
Third in rushing yards, right?
And had 11 touchdowns, 4 fumbles. And second best rookie season.
I think he had like 1,170 rushing yards is what I am thinking. I think I might be pretty close to that. I'm going to say the rushing yard. Well,
Cook and Henry, who had more rushing yards after Cook and Henry?
So Kenneth says the lie is being the team leader in rushing. Or I guess he means
that wasn't
fourth
one
one.
Of the options.
Well, the fourth one I think is what he's saying.
Second best rookie rushing season for the Colts. Right. And when I say that, I'm talking by just yards. Yards as the contributing factor, rookie rushing season.
Right.
All right, guys, we got 4 of these. Give me an answer.
I'm going with the first one.
The first one being that he was not third in rushing yards. What are you going with, Commish? Correct. Did he freeze, or is he still thinking?
I don't know. He's in deep thought. Deep thoughts by the Commish.
He froze. He froze. Okay. He froze. That's a great frozen picture. I don't know what I like better, that picture or the fact that he picked a kicker as his breakout player.
Oh, come on.
By the way,
that he'll never live that down.
He will never ever.
We're gonna get him we got to get him a T-shirt with you.
I love kickers. I love kickers. I'm gonna put a sign on his back that says "Kick me." He's texting into our kick me right. I lost my connection. You can end it anytime. All right. So the answer is Jonathan Taylor only had 1 fumble last year. He did not have 4 fumbles. He had the second best rookie rushing season. Not to Edgerrin James. I'm surprised you guys didn't get this, but to Marshall Faulk. Marshall Faulk had the number 1.
Right. Well, you course, right? Because you don't remember Mark. Yeah, because
you think of him as a Ram, of course.
A Ram.
Okay. Right. But he only had 1 fumble, which was very, very impressive. All right. 3 truths and a lie. We're talking about, and Commish is off, so this is going to be for you, Cyclop. Dalvin Cook. Oh, wait. Is someone
coming back? There he is.
Is he back? Yay! All right.
What was the answer?
So the answer was Jonathan Taylor only had 1 fumble. He did not have 4 fumbles.
So just so you know, Commish, it only took you being frozen for like 3 seconds before we made fun of your.
You were picking a kicker as you're breaking.
I hope you took a screenshot.
I should have. It was too good.
Oh, the screenshot was great
because you were like,
"I have to go." It was like
you were saying, "Oh, young Koo." Okay, all right. So here we go. Dalvin Cook. 3 truths and a lie. Number 1, I averaged the most fantasy points per game from running backs. Number 2, I was 7th in yards per attempt. Of running backs that had at least 150 carries, because, those guys that had 3 attempts for 20 carries. Of at least 150, I was 7th in yards per attempt, averaging 4.99. 2nd in rushing yards per game at 111. And I only had 1 receiving touchdown. Which one of these is false? Again, I averaged the most out of running backs. I averaged the most fantasy points a game. I'm 7th in yards per attempt. 2nd in rushing yards per game at 111. Or I only had 1 receiving touchdown. Which one of these is the lie?
Can I have a clarification, please?
Sure.
I know for a fact that Christian McCaffrey led the league in fantasy points per week. So that average, but however, he only played
3 games.
3 games. So is that question that you're asking include?
It does include Christian McCaffrey.
I think number 1 is the lie.
That is exactly right.
Yeah.
He was actually, you know something? It did not include McCaffrey. I apologize. It did not but you're right.
Yeah.
But you're right because I had it as Derrick Henry as number one, but everything else was true. So you were still right. Actually, I wasn't including McCaffrey. He was 7th in yards per attempt, which is amazing. I can't believe he only had one receiving touchdown, and he was 2nd in rushing yards per game. So by default, excellent. You got that right.
So just a quick stat on Cook. Cook only had last year 6 games of less than 100 yards. One of those games, he had 96, so he was right there. So he had 5 games of less than 100 yards, and he didn't even play week 17. Yeah. That's pretty amazing.
Amazing.
He had 181, 130, 163, 206, 115, 120, 102, 132. I mean, it's pretty amazing.
It is extremely efficient.
Yeah. Just to clarify how close 2 and 3 are, in a half-point PPR league. I'm sorry. I was looking at total fantasy points because I have McCaffrey, then Cook, then Henry. But if we're talking
on average
rushing, if we're not looking at receiving, then it's completely different.
Right.
But it's McCaffrey who averaged 29.3 fantasy points per game.
Then Henry at 27. Yeah.
I had Cook at 26 and Henry at 24.
Actually, I had Henry at 27. So I guess depending upon the league, but on average fantasy points. Okay, let's move on. Ironically, our next player is Christian McCaffrey. So one of these we already know. Number one, before my injury, I was averaging the most fantasy points per game at 27.3. Okay, so we know that. In my 3 games that I played, I scored 6 touchdowns. In yards per attempt, I was ranked as the 99th running back. I averaged 15 rushing attempts per game.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which one? Again.
I think they're all right.
But no, there's 3 truths and a lie. Which one is the lie? Again, this is all for 2020 before the injury. I averaged the most points per game. I scored 6 touchdowns. I was ranked as the 99th running back in my rushing average yards per attempt, and I averaged 15 rushing attempts a game.
I'm going to say 15 rushing attempts a game.
I think it's less than 15 rushing attempts per game.
This is what blew my mind. You're right, but it's not less. He averaged 20 rushing attempts per game.
Yeah, but his yards per carry were not high.
Were terrible. 99th running back in yards per carry. Who would have thought that of balling out Christian McCaffrey? All right. Joe Mixon.
This is our last one.
This is our last one, correct?
Go ahead.
Okay, Joe Mixon. Granted, only played – what's that?
Terrible. Go ahead.
Yes, 6 games. In my 6 games, I scored 4 total touchdowns, but I was ranked 11th in total yards per game at 94.3. I was ranked 20th in fantasy football points per game, total fantasy football points, and I ranked 3rd in rushing attempts per game. Truth, lie, which is false.
Number 3 is false. He was number 10 and this is because I did the research when I was looking at fantasy points per week. I had Mixon at number 10 in the league, not 20.
What do you have, Cyclop?
Because he sucked so bad for me last year, I've pretty much blacked him out of my mind.
So again, he only played 6 games.
I'll go with Commish.
Well, that was smart to piggyback on that, and you're absolutely right. With those terrible numbers, 4 total touchdowns. He did rank 3rd in rushing attempts, but yes, that is correct. He did not rank 20th in fantasy points per game. He ranked 11th. So good job.
He would have gotten 20th had he not gotten hurt.
It'd have been a whole season, exactly, and that's why I threw that one in there. But you did your homework, goddammit, and you saw through my charade. So very nicely done.
Well, we really appreciate it. Nicely done, Keith. I love this segment. Thank you for putting that together. What we're going to do is we're going to end the show tonight. Next week, we're coming back with our wide receiver list, and it'll be my turn to have my list destroyed by you guys. and I will give it to you early enough so you can make your comments and get them ready to go. You can poke holes in my list, but I'm going to get you that wide receiver list for next week. We can talk about which wide receivers we should draft, which ones we shouldn't, who are the sleepers, who are the breakout stars. And, of course, we will have the Kenny question of the night next week. We'll bring that up as well. So, guys, hope everyone has a great night. Cyclop Keith, final words?
God damn it, I can't wait to get through wide receivers and tight ends just so we can get to kickers already. Jesus.
Right.
I'm out. See you next week.
All right.
All right, later, guys.
Bye-bye then.